My secret, just do something that ain't nobody ever done before, but make it sound like something that's always been there forever.
Welcome to This Filipino American Life, a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States at iba pa. This is Joe Bernardo, and I'm recording live from Makati, Philippines.
Philippines.
Yes, I'm in Metro Manila right now. Me and my wife, Girly.
Hello.
We are here. Yeah, that's not Girly, dude. We are here visiting Manila. We're kind of traveling around,
Manila.
And I wanted to do a few interviews here while I'm here talking to Filipino Americans who have moved back to the Philippines and kind of just get their stories and why they decided to move back to the Philippines.
Yes.
So today I have Roland Ross.
Hi.
Roland.
Hello.
It's Roland Ross, not Roland Navarro, right?
Yeah, that's Ross.
Roland Ross. And he is co-founder and CEO of Kumu.
Yeah.
Kumu has been, they sponsored us. You've probably heard their ads on our podcast. But yeah, they are the newest kind
But
of...
we haven't paid our invoice yet, though. So,
yeah, you owe us a little bit of money, dude.
yeah.
But Kumu is a new media platform here in the Philippines.
Yes.
And he's going to talk more about this. But I also wanted to kind of talk about...
Hello, Manga Pose.
I want to talk about his journey here to the Philippines, back to the Philippines. Born and raised in America, but moving back here. And so, yeah, welcome to TFAL, Roland.
Yes, I am so excited that I'm cool enough to be on TFAL.
Stupid.
So,
It's just a matter of distance. That's why you haven't been on TFAL.
yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Nothing, man. Just enjoying the Philippines. I mean,
How are you liking it?
well, it's only been our first day, so we're just kind of in and around Metro Manila, and man, there's so much changes here.
Yeah.
So many new buildings. It's crazy. Just a lot more social divisions. But it's true. It's true. But yeah, let's talk about your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're the founder of Kumu. But I also want to know kind of your origins and where you're from and everything like that.
Yes.
So where are you from? Where are your parents from? How did you come to the U.S.?
Yeah, so so my grandpa moved to Indiana. She went to medical school in the U.S. But long story short, I'm from the 818, San Fernando Valle.
Great 1-8.
The Great 1-8. And then when my parents split up when I was young, my mom raised me in a small desert town called Palmdale. Palmdale. And then just went to college in Santa Barbara, and then just moved back down to LA and really caught this bug about really coming back to the Philippines.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how did you first get that bug, you said, to go back to the Philippines, or even think about like kind of your identity, your heritage, and all that stuff?
Yeah, so you're supposed to tell me that I'm not supposed to say you?
It's not just me.
No, but the thing is, actually, the reason why I was joking about that was because Joe was one of the leaders of a Filipino club in our campus at UC Santa Barbara. And there was a show called Filipino Cultural Night, and he invited me to go. At the time, I didn't really have that much interest in like Filipino things at the time in college. And he actually invited me to be a part of it. And there was like Filipino dances, Filipino choir, and I thought Filipino choir would be a cool way because, American Pie had just gotten out, and I thought it would be a cool way to meet a girl. So that's exactly what happened.
You're so stupid.
And and then from there, I learned about like Carlos Bulasan and Filipino American history. I learned about the 1965 Immigration Act. Learned about model minority myths and all sorts of things that really got me thinking about, my identity and my place here on Earth. And I really got crystallized in Santa Barbara.
So college, I mean, I know a lot of folks who kind of explore their identity, explore their cultural heritage in college. So what was it like before college, I mean, were you involved?
I was into hip hop.
Okay.
So a lot of scratching, turntablism, can I beatbox?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And so, like, the thing is, so a lot of the spoken word, the freestyle, those types of things, for someone growing up in Palmdale and, there weren't really too many Asian Americans out there, really saw a lot of good identity hanging out with a lot of, like, Latino hip hop folks, those types of things. And yeah, it was just hip hop. My brother, we would go to like Home Depot, getting like, the linoleum from Home Depot, cut a square so we could break dance on it, saved up for some turntable equipment, those types of things. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But there were Filipinos in Palmdale, no? Or no?
Yeah, there were but they were all into like, crews and gangs and stuff like that. I was actually in a party crew. I was in CBK, Care Bear Clan. And so,
what?
Yeah.
Care Bear Clan.
Care Bear Clan. They were like, the members were like in Northridge. And, instead of getting jumped in, you had to dance in. And so,
Please tell me there are videos on this.
I don't know. You'd have to ask the Care Bear Clan. I don't know where they're at. And then we got beat up a lot. So we changed our name to No Limits with a Z. And so we became a part of the No Limits crew. And so, yeah.
Wow. I didn't know this about you.
Yeah.
So Roland, I've known him for, close to like 25 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, 25 years.
Yeah, 20. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. At least 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
I've never knew this about you.
What about being in a dance crew?
Well, no, not the whole.
Because it was either that or being in a race crew or a gang.
Yeah.
And so I think dance crew was like the safest bet.
That's where kind of Filipino American identity gets performed.
Yeah.
These kind of like little.
Yeah. First time I did a tinikling was in, when you turn like a debut. Yeah. My first ever Filipino dance was like in someone's debut.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
then in Santa Barbara, you kind of learned more the history and kind of the politics behind being Filipino American.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
That kind
I got all politicized. I was like into like, marching and, making signs.
What?
Like being anti-capitalist and that type of stuff. So yeah, it's just funny how
that's so opposite of what you know.
No, it's like I got into social entrepreneurism after college, but yeah, I was all into all that stuff.
And then you were also into you became kind of a spoken word poet, right?
Yeah, I did spoken word. Yes, with Saul Williams. So the first time I saw a movie called Slam, and then Saul Williams was the star of that, and that inspired me to be a spoken word artist. And then my last ever spoken word was performing opening for him as a senior.
Saul Williams.
Yeah, it was super dope. Yeah, wow. It was Ants.
Oh yeah,
Ants.
What was Ants about?
It was about like, really comparing, our situation in the context of, who we are as humans to the stratified society that we lived. Mm-hmm. And that, whether it was carpenter ants, farm ants, leafcutter ants, black ants, Latino ants, Asian ants, we all come together. And it was literally about revolution. So it's kind of ironic how, I'm part of a different revolution, I guess.
Oh my gosh. So we'll get into that. But so in college you became politicized, and then, but you also kind of you want to do something after college, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You went to the Philippines for the first time as part of an exchange program.
Tagalog on site. Yeah. Susan Kimpo, Ate Susan, wherever you're at. Love you.
So what was that experience like? Tell us about that.
Dude, so that program, it was super just identity changing too, it was an 8-week program, and I think there was something really beautiful about really coming face to face with your Filipino American identity. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we got the cultural classes, the history classes, the psychology classes from professors from Ateneo, UP, a couple instructors from La Salle, but I think it was really coming face to face with, like, for example, Clark Air Force Base. That's Filipino and American colliding in your face. So, touring the red light districts, going in and doing research and talking to, those who have been trafficked, talking to the what they call the Amerasian children who were left behind by their military fathers. I think it was the toxic waste contamination that was left behind by the U.S. military, meeting children with cerebral palsy, cancer, mothers with dying of cancer, those types of things. Really meeting women who, are just trying to survive after, like one particular woman, I remember she was telling me she had like 23 abortions, those types of things. And it was just like that experience of really coming face to face with what it meant to be Filipino American was really life-changing for me.
So that was a travel abroad program.
Yes.
That's no longer around, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of sad that it's not.
Wow.
But that's one of the reasons why I became part of Kaya Collaborative, which is an organization that really looks for super promising Filipinos in the U.S., Canada, UK, and then we sponsor these two-month fellowships where they actually, are interns for social enterprises and tech companies in the Philippines.
So you were in the U.S., and there's a strong Filipino community in the U.S.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks get involved with the Filipino community.
Sure.
But you decided a different route. You decided to move back to the Philippines.
Yeah.
Right. So like,
where are we going to go? Oh, yeah. That's absolutely.
So like what went into that decision?
Well, a lot of it was throughout my 15-year journey of trying to get, so when I studied abroad, I was like, shit, I'm going to come back. Wait, I can say that, right? Shit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Shit,
fuck, motherfucker, ass, biatch. Can I say fuck face?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing misogynistic.
Yeah. Oh, dude, no way, dude. So, happy Mother's Day. Love you, mama. So the thing is, I think, during my whole journey, I tried to do community service work, humanitarian work. I tried to do, try to be a missionary. I invested in a startup, those types of things. And, I think it was really Kayako. I was really inspired because seeing these college students and watching their lives being transformed over their 2-month experience in the Philippines, as a board member of that organization, more and more I was kind of getting this whisper to just go out and move to the Philippines. The biggest person, though, was Ambassador Quisia, or Jose Quisia. He was the Philippine ambassador to the U.S. at the time, and he had a conversation with me telling me that, Roland, we really appreciate all the work that you're doing in the Philippines, but maybe one of the best ways that you could, quote unquote, help the Philippines is actually move here and start a company. And so ever since he challenged me with that, I couldn't really let go of what that meant. Yeah.
So, there's always kind of a preconceived notion of what the Philippines is.
Yeah.
Especially for Filipino Americans who don't come here very often.
Yeah.
There's kind of I don't say romanticization.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of the Philippines. What is your experiences like as a Filipino American coming to the Philippines? I mean,
yeah. No, there's it's split, right? Because the thing is, like this year especially, right? Philippines is like one of the fastest growing economies in the world right now. And then it has been consecutively over the last 4 or 5 years. And so there's kind of like a growing, and I'm starting to see it too. And when you saw it, you haven't seen that many skyscrapers being built and those types of things. So there is kind of like a running joke amongst entrepreneurs and stuff who see Philams come in here trying to save the Philippines. You know what I mean? Trying to be all messianic about it, that type of thing. Whereas there's other folks who are actually working side by side with the Philippines and building alongside the communities. So you either work alongside with the communities and work and do something of social impact, or you kind of go in there saying, trying to build a hospital when the village wasn't even asking for a hospital. It's almost kind of insulting.
So there's kind of would you say there's a Filipino American savior complex?
Yeah, so there's that side. Yeah. And then from a deep social enterprise kind of human-centered design thinking, kind of hey, let's work with the community, understanding what the needs are, and then working alongside them and building, I think is, or for example, in the case of what a lot of folks that we know is the team is made up of both Filipinos and, you know, international folks working alongside together to get things done. So yeah.
How about like the everyday stuff, like being a Filipino American? Like you didn't really grow up speaking Tagalog, right? Or any Filipino language?
Yeah, I mean, can't tell. This is my Quezon City accent.
Stupid.
Why?
So, anyways,
Taga saan kayo? Yeah, no, the thing is, I just, you know, I'm very well aware of that. And so like a lot of folks on my team do take the lead on a lot of particular conversations because of the fact that, you know, I might come across like not, like for example, if I was sitting at a table with certain folks from say like the province or even other sections of Metro Manila, if I was at that table, you know, everyone's polite, kind, but there's like no conversation going on. But if someone on my team who's local is in that same exact meeting, dude, they're all like super like open, talking about certain things, that type of stuff. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever find yourself like kind of performing an accent?
No, not really performing an accent, but actually, if I speak in a particular accent, they would actually pick up on words better.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when I say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, if I say it like that, they would understand. But if I said supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, like, you know, it would.
So that comes up in a conversation. You say that?
No. It's like
no, I get
car,
it,
bathroom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just doesn't pick up as fast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's not because I'm performing. It's more so because I need them to retain what I just said.
Okay.
Or they'll blank out. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Do you find people ever treat you differently because you don't speak Tagalog?
I haven't seen it yet. You know, the thing is, the Philippines is just getting really cosmopolitan. I think the international. I mean, more and more, I'm seeing more Chinese folks, Korean folks, a lot of folks from like random places like French communities, Brazilian communities coming in here. You know, again, it's one of the fastest growing economies in the world now. So you're seeing like a lot of people move in and starting businesses here and that type of stuff. So yeah.
So speaking of starting businesses, you have Kumu. Yeah. So what is Kumu to anybody who hasn't downloaded it yet?
Yeah, so basically it's just a live streaming app, a live commerce and social gaming app for young Filipinos. So it's mostly Gen Z, millennial. We have about 1 million people who downloaded it. It's been pretty cool. Yeah.
What is it though? I mean, what is a live streaming app mean?
So live streaming is basically you go live. So the difference between say like us and say like a Facebook Live or YouTube is the fact that our technology is in real time. So you can have like really engaging conversations globally without that 20-second delay that Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube have.
They have that?
Yeah, but it's like 20-second delay.
Really?
Yeah. So
really
it's kind of like when a celebrity goes live, it's like pasharap po, notice me. And so like, and then the person who goes live just responds to the comment 20 seconds later. Whereas for us, you know, call it like a TV alternative for a lot of young Filipinos. So, you know, and they're talking about body positivity, body love, embracing your morena skin, you know, female empowerment, sexuality, you know, those types of things. You know, a lot of things that people don't really talk about so much on local media.
So like anybody can start a channel.
Yeah, anybody. I mean, we have, it's been downloaded in over 55 countries. Most of them are, you know, Metro Manila, big cities in the province, overseas locations like Jeddah, Dubai, Malaysia, Singapore, New York, San Francisco, that type of stuff.
Okay. So it's kind of like okay, I get it. I
get
it now.
If you guys know Twitch, like Twitch is like a live stream, a very, very popular live streaming app, but mostly all they do is play video games. For us, they're live streaming, but they're just doing normal things. Like, again, like they're talking about topics that are important to them. One of our number one hashtags is tambay. So people just go live and they just hang out and meet new friends like all over. And it's great because their parents aren't on it, right? Like you can't really like talk about how gay you are on Facebook, you know? Yeah. Whereas like on Kumu, they talk about everything, especially after dark.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like late night Kumu is like lit.
So that's the attraction of Kumu, right? So,
well, that part, so there's the authenticity of going live, right? So you can't pretend like on Instagram, right? You take like 10 pictures and say #blessed, right? You can't fake a live stream. You're just live. So there's that aspect.
Yeah.
The other aspect is you're not creating content for likes. What ends up happening is if you're a viewer and you like what the content creator is saying, you actually give them a virtual gift. It looks like a like, but it actually costs money. So you could give them like a holo for 2 centavos, or a hug for 1 peso. Or the big one is, if you really like what they have to say, you send them a Malacanang, and that's 1,000 pesos. So what really makes it more authentic is not just creating content for likes, but from a viewer perspective, you're actually giving that person money in real time. So when you're looking at a market that sends about $30 billion a year in remittances to the Philippines, capturing just a really small percentage of that is actually the foundations of a very large media business.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, okay, I get it.
Yeah. Nice. So like, for example, we have overseas Filipinos spending around $2,000 a month in these virtual gifts, and these millennials are giving these virtual gifts to mostly Gen Z creators. So it could be like a UP college student talking about lifestyle to, people who are cooking, people are talking about all sorts of stuff.
Is it because people like the content and they're willing to pay?
Yeah, so that's what's so weird, right? So like, if you are a millennial registered nurse in the US who you're not really watching TFC, right? You're watching Game of Thrones and Netflix.
Yeah.
So their connection back home is, say, because we actually broke our content into different languages and geolinguistics. So if you want to connect with like a Bicolano or a Kapampangan or a Ilocano or a Tagalog region, or even Becky speaking content creator, you just go and you just connect. You watch them. They talk about certain things. If you like what they have to say, you just send them a virtual gift.
And then, are there kind of language barriers too? Like, if I'm Film and I don't really understand Tagalog, or other languages.
So yeah, we haven't launched too heavily yet. I think we're planning in October for Filipino American History Month. We've identified a lot of creators who are super engaging and those types of things. But for sure, it's in the college students. So we're planning on launching in college campuses and those types of things.
So how's it changing kind of the landscape here in the Philippines in terms of media content?
Yeah, it's being disrupted. Everything's being disrupted, from hotels to the way you transport. It's not even here. It's the whole entire region. It's like China 10 years ago, which is crazy. It's like Back to the Future. Imagine like in Back to the Future where you remember in Back to the Future 2 where the guy took the almanac and he knew all the scores and then he went back in time. Like that's literally what's happening. I feel like I got transported here from like a different time, and then I have like the blueprint on exactly what to do. Like everyone is getting on the internet for the first time, and it's not through the laptop, it's actually through the mobile phone. And so it's just like nuts. And with some of our business partners in China, we see how live streaming is actually now bigger than the box office. It's bigger than the movie industry there. So we're just getting a lot of tips on how to really build content. Yeah.
How did you conceive of the app?
Well, the biggest thing, long story short, it's a really long story, but the biggest thing is we're seeing trends about prioritizing the voices of the entire country. So messaging was super important back in 2010, WeChat for China, Kakao Korea, Line Japan, and then on-demand services in Indonesia through Gojek. And then Vietnam was able to build a really large app around mobile gaming. And so for us, we're like, okay, the thesis is, why don't we build an app for Filipinos? And then the first iteration did look a little bit too much like Viber, but when you look at the data, it really told us that, wow, it's all about live streaming. So the biggest disruption and opportunity for us was basically creating a Gen Z millennial alternative for like an ABS or a GMA.
Yeah, because like in even in the US, people really aren't watching TV anymore, right? And that's kind of disrupting the whole TV industry.
Yeah.
And now everybody's like just going on YouTube, or just like on the internet or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're providing an alternative through Kumu.
Yeah, just like a localized. So basically for us, the thesis is any country with at least 50 million internet users and a global population of 1 million people who send money back home. So by far the Philippines looks like a great use case, and then we could replicate that in multiple countries. So if you do something like, and so for us they go, well, I don't get it, why are you guys competing with like a Facebook or Instagram? It's not so much a Facebook and an Instagram. For people who's listening from Los Angeles or actually in the US, it's like a Univision for Gen Z millennials, right? Like we noticed that there's a huge opportunity to build like a Univision for local younger Filipinos who just want to relate to local stuff. There's a company that I think We Are Me Too is pretty similar. I guess maybe they're focusing on younger, but for us, it's just that. It's just really focusing on the next generation.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
Thanks.
What's it like actually running the business? Like, how did you form your team? And how did you, what's it like dealing with the labor laws here in the Philippines, for example?
That's an interesting question on the labor laws. I think one of the hardest things is really how to work and just make sure that you're within the regulations and those types of things. I think before we even started Kumu, we kind of jokingly call ourselves like an Avengers initiative. So, back home in LA, I was running an advertising technology company, and I was only whoever's listening, sorry, I was saving up a lot of money. And so with those savings, I was traveling around the world. I was going to like San Francisco, New York, LA, Washington, DC, China, all sorts of different places, looking for passionate Filipinos who wanted to be a part of this project. And so...
How did you find them? Did you put like an ad saying, looking for passionate Filipinos on the local newspaper?
I think a lot of it was just really, as an entrepreneur, specifically as an advertising technology entrepreneur, and also engaging in a lot of that humanitarian and community service work in the Philippines, you start building that network. On the Philippine side, it was obviously Dato Banatao, back when he took over the Ayala Foundation and that big old network of tech people. And then through Kaya Collaborative, and those types of things. And then on the advertising technology side, when I sold my first internet company, our advisors came from PayPal. And so from that big old network in San Francisco and also in New York, was able to really identify and find passionate Filipinos in the technology side. So yeah.
What about any advice you have for any Filipino Americans wanting to, just come to the Philippines and either live or open a business or anything like that?
I would highly encourage. I mean, it's just so crazy. I mean, even from like a digital economy perspective, right? So Google just did a report that the whole Southeast Asian region, the internet economy is going to grow from $72 billion to $240 billion. A lot of it driven through logistics, e-commerce, and media. And so there's enough room for a lot of people. It's like the gold rush. In California, there was a huge gold rush and a lot of people migrated for an opportunity to mine for gold. I think what's going on here in the Philippines, and it's not just the Philippines, it's the whole world is shifting. A lot of people need to recognize that we're living in a completely different state. All the power is being concentrated into 120 key cities around the world. So that way, if you look at it, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York have built big enough economies within their context that they're more or less isolated from things that are going on from a national perspective. If you compare it. Yeah. And so if you look at the geopolitical landscape, as a Filipino American, I either could have an impact on the world, specifically focusing on Los Angeles and then having an impact on the rest of the world through LA. So that's one impact. Another thing though, if you're Filipino American, is on the Philippine side, there's only one city that is in that 120 cities, and that's Manila. And that if I have an impact on Manila, I have a huge chance of having an impact on the entire country and an entire region. So with the remaining days I have left on Earth, and I have an impact, and I look at the 120 key cities that are really controlling and where all the power is being distributed, I'm telling you, Manila, Cebu, there's all Iloilo, Bacolod, Davao. There's so many really interesting things that are happening in the Philippines right now, especially with regards to its position as a theater of trade war between China and the U.S. I mean, it's just crazy just seeing how much the Philippines has grown over the last like 5 to 10 years.
So how about any advice for people facing challenges? Or what were some of your challenges when you're setting up?
The biggest challenges is one is it was like the weather and the traffic. And then if you're trying to start a business, I think just really getting really aware of like
the weather
of starting a business, right?
Yeah.
My thing was so I still don't live on a salary, right? So the thing is, I saved up for at least a year's worth of salary. I always told this to any entrepreneur anyways, is, save up about like 6 months to a year, have a working kind of business that looks promising before you move there. So for me, before I moved here, the app had already gone through its beta stage while I was living in Los Angeles. And I didn't decide to move here until I saw enough growth and enough interest to go. But yeah, just get used to the if you can get used to the traffic and the weather and those types of things. It's especially if you're in Metro Manila, it does. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's like any other city.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like any other city in the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So last question, where do you see Kumu in the next kind of 3 to 5 years?
3 to 5. So definitely from our current million to around 20 million users in the Philippines, and then launching globally within those like 16 or 17 other countries we identified that have at least 50 million internet users and a global population of 1 million sending money back home to their home country. So countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, Brazil, Indonesia, Vietnam, but we wouldn't call it Kumu. Like for example, in Thailand, it would be called Sawa, short for Sawadika.
Oh wow,
that kind of stuff. Yeah,
that's cool.
So, yeah.
Oh man. So, anyways, thank you again for joining TFAL.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I feel so honored to be here. This is like freaking crazy. It's like TFAL.
Next time it'd be better if we had like the entire crew.
Yeah.
Here we could riff off each other.
Dude, yeah. We'll all be talking crap to each other. It'll be funny. Yeah.
But thanks for coming.
Yes, awesome.
You want to give anyone a shout out, or how can folks find you or find Kumu?
Yeah, just we're on both stores, Google, Apple Play, just type in Kumu.
KUMU.
KUMU, short for Kumusta. And then or kumu.ph, and you'll just get redirected to the right store, depending.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Awesome.
Hey guys.
Hey Elaine.
What's up, Elaine?
Did you know that we have TFALs?
Yes.
What's a TFAL?
I mean, what?
TFALs are our Patreons. They joined at patreon.com/TFAL podcast, and they support us every month.
Oh, is that what you announced like one of our episodes, if there's a T-Pal of the episode?
Correct.
So those people are Patreons?
Yes.
Cool.
Really? I actually thought they were random.
Are you serious?
Are you serious?
Mike is actually serious.
Wow, I'm learning something today.
Yeah.
And also are all of you right now.
So if you want to be a TFAL and surprise Mike, join us at patreon.com/TFAL podcast.
But not only do you get to shout out on the episode, you get cool things as a TPAL, correct?
Ooh, like what kind of cool things, Ryan?
Like what? Like
Sometimes you get free giveaways.
oh, like what? Like a sticker?
Yes, like our logo sticker.
What?
Or our new TFAL Hearts OPM sticker that is inspired by Chicken Joy Division.
And you also get some free books if we get them from the authors. We'll definitely set aside some for our Patreons.
Correct.
And pictures of me.
I
I'm
can
just
actually,
kidding. No,
I
I'm
will.
What,
Now that-
exclusive Polaroids? Not that kind of Patreon, guys.
Numbered.
That's totally going to be a thing now. I'm going to take pictures of Ryan and give them to the Patreons.
But not only do you get all that, you also get some shout outs or say in some episodes.
That's true.
We'll get your opinions on certain subjects in upcoming episodes. And we'll also, as a new thing, we'll send you some blooper reels of TFAL. Only for the Patreons.
Only for the Patreons?
Only for the Patreons.
Oh, man. If you want some laughs, be a Patreon today.
Lewds, but no nudes.
But if subscribing monthly to TFAL is not your thing, maybe you can support us by giving us a Ko-fi.
Ko-fi? What's that?
It's a one-time donation to This Filipino American Life.
Cool.
Yes. So either do Patreon or Ko-fi. What's the website for Ko-fi, Elaine?
Ko-fi.com/TFAL.
Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/TFAL podcast.
Yes. So thank you very much. And welcome back to TFAL, This Filipino American Life
Yeah.
podcast. And we're still here in Manila.
Hello.
Makati to be exact. Me and Girly are traveling in the Philippines, and we decided to interview some folks that we know or are doing big things here in the
Lovely
Philippines.
things.
Yeah. So kind of more into our episode about Filipino Americans moving back to the Philippines. I'm here with Carmel Lorino.
Yeah.
What up, Carmel?
Hey.
It's so loud, Girly.
You're the one handling the tech, dude.
Sorry, producer Mike's not here handling tech, and I'm trying to figure things out on the fly.
And he's probably going to keep this in anyway because it's funny.
Stupid.
Stupid. Or stupid. I'm going to count all the stupid.
Yes. Keep a tally.
I will.
Okay, so Carmel, you are the owner, CEO, founder of Calzada Coffee.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so on the credits, it's all just your name, right?
Yeah, it's just me. Me,
Yeah.
myself, and I.
So before we get into the story of how you started Calzada Coffee, I wanted to get to know a little bit about you. Where did you grow up, and where are your parents from, and then how did they come to the U.S., and where did you grow up?
Cool. So my family is originally from Cebu. I was born there. We moved to the States when I was 7. And we moved specifically to Central Washington State. We ended up there because my grandfather, who's a World War II veteran, moved to the States with my mom's eldest brother and his wife, who were petitioned by during the 1970s when they were bringing in a lot of different folks, like that wave of migration. So my grandfather went with them, and my aunt was a dietitian and went to Central Washington University to do her master's. And so that's how when the rest of the 8 kids moved to the U.S., kind of followed that migration pattern, because my grandfather was there, and my uncle and aunt were already there. So that's how we ended up in Central Washington State.
And what city?
We ended up in Sila, which is about 2.5 hours from Seattle, and it's about 45 minutes from Wapato, which has a big Filipino community as well in doing farming. So
We just learned about the Filipinos in Wapato. Lots of Ilocanos.
Lots of Ilocanos. It's also part of Carlos Bulasan's America's in the Heart. He talks about that. But we didn't end up in Central Washington doing farming. So that's how we ended up there. In Sila. Sila. So I was born in Cebu, but grew up in the state of Washington.
Bisdak. What's that mean again?
Bisayang dako.
What's that mean?
Big Bisaya. Like I don't know. That's the literal translation, so I don't think that really works.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's kind of a...
And like a acronym. Filipinos love their acronyms, but it's like a shortened. So Bisdak is Bisaya, and then Dak is Dako.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
At least I hope that's the case. I hope I'm not telling people the wrong thing, but that's what that is.
Oh. Beefsteak.
Beef steak.
That's me.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so you grew up in Washington,
Yep.
and then you went to high school there, right?
Yeah, I went to high school, elementary, middle school, high school in a really small town, mostly like I had a bunch of white friends. My Filipino identity was tied to family parties and like food. And actually, the first time I had other regional foods from Luzon was in the U.S. Like the first time I'd seen palabok or kare-kare was at a family party, and I'd be like, this isn't Filipino food because my mom never cooked that because that's not from Cebu. So for me, growing up, up until moving to Seattle for college at the University of Washington, my identity was tied to home and family parties. We would watch basketball games and sing karaoke. And so that was me. And then at school and outside, it was like me as Carmel as an American with a bunch of white friends. So, and then
a lot of code switching.
Yes, lots of code switching.
Yeah.
And I think not until I moved to Seattle to go to the University of Washington, that's where sort of my consciousness of being Filipino and Filipino American and seeing other Filipino Americans that were my age came into being. That's where I first started exploring what that meant, what the Philippines meant to me besides beaches and mangoes and lechon. And the first time I had gone back to the Philippines was when I was 14. And I remember specifically my first couple of days where I would only whisper to my parents in English because I was so ashamed I didn't know how to speak Cebuano anymore.
I was going to ask you that, if you had retained your language.
Yeah, so in my head, I thought I could. And then I was just like so conscious of, because growing up, I mean, up until I was 7, I had these cousins. So my memories of the Philippines were summer times in the province and swimming and hanging out with them. And then I saw my cousins again and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so different. I don't know how to speak this language, which was my my mother tongue. And so I was so embarrassed. And then I think I really forced myself after a week in Cebu to learn. So that's to relearn it.
Yeah.
And I remember crying because I wanted to stay longer because it was summer break in the States. And we tried to change my ticket so I could fly back to the States later than my parents because they had to go back to work. But I was like, it's summer, I want to stay. And we couldn't do it. And it was just super bitten. It was like super short. And I just remember being on the flight back to Seattle and being like, okay, I got to remember how to speak Cebuano. Oh. And I just had this conscious effort of doing that just so I could relate to my cousins and converse with them. I don't think my Cebuano is still that great, but it's much, much better than my Tagalog. But it was that first visit that was really this eye-opening, I need to retain this language. So
since that visit, did you always feel that you were not bi-coastal, transnational? Or did you always kind of felt that?
I did feel that duality, I think, after that first visit, but not until I went to UW and met my Filipino American friends there and started getting involved in different organizations did I feel, one, more Filipino, quote unquote, in the US, but then when I would always travel back, I'm like, I'm so American. And then I was, you kind of get into this like morass that you're like, okay, what am I? And like had that whole identity thing.
Who am I?
Totally.
And so I was like, okay.
These brown hands.
So that hybridity kind of got to me. Like what do I do about that? How do I move forward? And so, I had joined, I did a Philippine Studies program through UP Diliman, and I was here for that. And that was the first time I had traveled to the Philippines outside of Cebu. So that was me coming to Manila and being like, this is not the Philippines I know. And I remember my dad having me fly to Cebu, and so that my cousin could fly with me to Manila and hand me off to the person who was picking me up at the airport. So all my cousin had to do was really take me to Manila, and she just turned back around and flew another flight because my dad was so scared that I was going to be visiting this big city that, you know, they themselves don't even come to. When my parents fly back to the Philippines, I go to Cebu to see them. They've never seen Calzada and what we've been up to in Manila, which is, I think, fine because I don't want my parents to get nervous and scared of Manila traffic and all of these things. And they'd be like, Anna, come back to the U.S.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Philippine Studies program was the first time, the first like way for me to see. That's where I met Phil Ams from, like LA, California, of course, and New Jersey, and there was a kid from Vancouver. So I would say they were my first Phil Am friends before I met like Joe and you guys. So that was really fascinating, just meeting other folks that were my age, exploring the Philippines, learning things.
Yeah, a lot of these exposure programs kind of gives Phil Am's kind of get a slice of Filipino life.
Yeah.
I know Roland, who we talked to earlier, was talking about that kind of changed his life and kind of oriented himself towards the Philippines.
Yeah, and also I felt, I mean, this is before Grab and all of, like, before Uber and all of these things, right? Like, you had to, if we got drunk really late at night and had to go back to our hotel, you had to really be conscious of taxis and, you know, like traversing Manila. So it was like a different time where I felt that since that experience, I was like, okay, this isn't so scary. I've created friends and a small network. And I had also done an exposure trip through Anakbayan and Gabriela that summer as well. And then kind of just trying to understand my place in politics and history and what Phil Am's role is in the Philippine context. And then the following summer, I did an internship with the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. This was my junior year of college, and did some other things here. Learned about the Phil Health program, interviewed folks in Congress, but mostly they interviewed me. They're like, what are you doing here? What are you doing back? So instead of me being the one interviewing the folks I needed to interview for my internship, they were really fascinated about a Phil Am coming back to do an internship. And I think that was, for me, fascinating because I knew I wanted to do work here. I knew I wanted to come back and explore and support some sort of movement or because I was an international studies poli-sci undergrad with a human rights minor. So I wanted to do work here, but I tried different avenues. And so there was multiple trips that I came back to do. So that one, study abroad, I came back in the following year after graduating and interned at the Philippine Center for Philippine Legislators Committee on Population and Development, PLCPD. This is when they first had...
the acronyms.
Yeah,
so many acronyms.
This was the initial... reproductive women's rights, the bill. So that was like the first phases of that. And so I was in Congress again to do work for PLCPD. And then a couple of years later, I came back with our good friend Marites Mendoza. What up? And was part of the Fulbright Hayes language program, where I spent a couple months here learning Tagalog through, I think LaSalle was our partner university here.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, there was, before arriving here to do Calzada, I had like kind of explored, nothing stuck.
Yeah.
And then I think I was like, okay, maybe that's it. That's enough. I've done my part, or nothing stuck. So maybe I'm not supposed to come back to the Philippines. And so that was between 2005 to 2010. I had done, both family trips and also internships and work here.
So when did you officially move to the Philippines? What year?
To start Calzada, this was fall like October, November of 2013. So I've been here for a little over 5 years.
Okay.
6-year anniversary this year.
Oh.
I'm like,
So as a Filipino American, or kind of transnationally, like what's it like having moved back to the Philippines with all these changes? Like, what is life like for a Filipino American in the Philippines?
This time around, I mean, things were difficult. Of course, I started a new company. There was a lot of ups and downs. There still is. But I think technology and having like something like Grab and Uber and public transportation, it just was so much easier to do the type of work without having to navigate certain systems that I did prior to any of those things existing in the Philippines. And I think I'm more aware of where I am in terms of my role here. I mean, for me, living in the Philippines as a Filipino and American, I'm aware of the mobility, not just in terms of, being able to ride a jeepney, MRT, or just having that choice, right? Between all different types of transportation, which not a Filipino can't do without having this blue passport.
Sure.
But also in society where I can hang out with farmers, can relate to them in some way, but also be in board meetings and also get my foot through the door because I am who I am, right? So there's
certain privilege.
There's a lot of privilege,
okay.
And
there's still a lot of code switching that you're doing too.
In country for sure, and just knowing that because I can do that, then there's an opportunity and a voice that. Like who's going to represent those producers in those situations, and just not. I think for me, acknowledging that sense of privilege and owning it and making sure you're using it to better some sort of something. It's like I don't know, like Spider-Man. Use your powers for
with more power,
something like
more
that.
Responsibility.
Something like that. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. So let's talk more about Calzada. What is Calzada? What brought you to do coffee? Just all that stuff.
Yeah. So Calzada means road or street in Filipino. I've named it that when it was in conception. I wanted to trace coffee from farm to cup, the journey it takes a producer to bring their product to market. My journey as a Filipino American, going back to the Philippines, and the road one takes to explore that identity. And Calzada came about through college, actually. I was studying under Vince Raphael.
One of my advisors.
Yes. So I was taking a course under him, and I was doing a research paper on Filipino diaspora at the turn of the century. So I was looking at the pensionados that had moved to the U.S., looking at the Alaska-Yukon Pacific exposition that happened on our campus, which brought Igorots, and they caged them, and also kind of this juxtaposition of having the elite come as pensionados, but also having, like, they were from two different parts of the Philippines, right? It's not like you turned Igorots into pensionados. They just mountain people and people that lived in Manila. So it was,
but that was the narrative, right?
Yeah, that was the narrative.
Yeah, the narrative was basically America needed to justify their colonization in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So they brought Igorots, and then they also brought kind of the elite pensionados to show that
they're little brown brothers.
Yeah, Igorots who are quote unquote savages can become like civilized, quote unquote. Yeah, and it's really fucked. It's a really fucked up history.
And it happened on our campus, you know,
at University of Washington.
University of Washington. So I was doing a research project on that, and through archival work, I had come across this photograph, which really stuck. It was a 1909 black and white photo. The picture is of these white men hawking Philippine coffee beans, and the company was called Filipino Coffee Company. There was like Walis Tambo, there was cacao beans, so there was chocolates, there was all these things from the Philippines in that photograph. And it was very, you know, I felt like it represented also who I am, coming from the Pacific Northwest. I drank so much coffee living in Seattle. It was in Pike Place Market, and it was 70 years before Starbucks had set up their first shop in Pike Place. So Philippine coffee was there prior to Starbucks. So to me, I was like, wow, this is, you know, something to be proud of. Like, what would have happened if these guys stayed in Pike Place? Would Starbucks have served coffee? Is there still Philippine coffee being produced in the country, in the Philippines? And I mean, Joe, you lived in Seattle for quite some time. And, you know, like menus in Seattle, it wasn't like a trendy thing. You would just see seasonality. People would talk about farmers and where the meat was from. So that was part of, I felt, what the Northwest was all about. And coffee didn't grow in Seattle or in the Northwest, but it was something we heavily consumed. And at that time, when I saw the photo, specialty coffee was also starting, where now companies like Stumptown and others were promoting direct trade and transparency and traceability and putting the farmer's face on their products. And I was like, why aren't Philippine farmers part of this movement? Why are we still producing coffee? So that's sort of the impetus of Calzada. And this was in like 2008. I kind of left that on the back burner and tried some other things out in Seattle, and then came back to it. You know, like I was like, oh, when I'm old, I'll open a coffee shop and serve Philippine coffee. And then fast forward to like 2012, and I was like, what if there isn't any more coffee left? What, right. You know, like why not explore this now? Like, what am I hesitant? Like, I just want to go see if this actually exists. I wasn't going to move to the Philippines to start a coffee company. I just wanted to see where the story is now compared to this photograph 100 years ago. So that's sort of what led me to come back to just explore. It was like, what am I hesitating? Why am I hesitating? I was like, it's a hypothetical cliff. You're not gonna like die if you jump. So I moved short term here. I was like, oh, I'll be there for a couple months. Supposed to move to New York for grad school. Ended up moving here. And yeah, I had a network already from those previous projects and internships. So I hit up a journalist friend of mine that was still, I think she was still working at the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, PCIJ. And I asked her, I was like, hey, are there any coffee projects? What does that network look like? I had also gathered some friends in Seattle, like Aaron and Amber. They had helped create this blog, which was Calzada. We had a brand. So we were writing stories already prior to my move.
And the stories were about coffee?
About coffee.
But what is it? What exactly what do you do? What does Calzada do?
Now? Then?
Oh, it's different now.
Yeah. Now we're a company and we export coffee and we are a roaster here in Manila.
Okay.
But then it was just a blog of a bunch of people interested in this 1909 photo, and then what our role was. Like what is the story of Philippine coffee? So that's what it was in 2013.
Wow, what a journey.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Because all you know, like at least for me, all I knew about coffee was Barako.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what I mean. I don't drink coffee myself, but all you know about the Philippines.
Stop this interview now.
Stupid.
I actually don't even know like the significance of Barako coffee. if you were to have me do a taste test, like I don't think I could identify it.
Yeah. So Barako itself is a different type of coffee that's also grown here. Like, you know, there's different types of bananas, right? There's different types of mangoes. So in coffee, there's Typica, there's Arabica, there's Robusta, there's Excelsia, and then there's Barako is Liberica. So Barako is something that was grown in the lowlands in Cavite and other parts of the country and became this national drink of choice, and kind of the older generations gravitate towards it as this is the matapang, this is a strong coffee, this is what Philippine coffee is. Calzada does not work with Barako. For us, it's exploring. We work with Arabica coffee producers, so trying to create a different brand and identity for specialty coffee, different like nuances. Like it's not Philippine coffee is just not Barako. There's all these other flavors. There's this other nuances that is much more favorable to exporting and what the market abroad is actually looking for.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So where are the farmers that you work with?
We work with producers primarily in Benguet, up north, about 5 hours away from Manila. So we work with about 200 farmers there. We started working with producers in Bukidnon in Mindanao. So there's a small community there that we've started engaging with, teaching them processing methods, investing in machinery, and really to get their quality standards to export quality levels. So
these are already kind of coffee growers.
Yeah. So from when I moved here to now, I wanted to see from the grassroots perspective what was the missing link in order for us to have Philippine coffee again in Seattle, right? It's like, what are farmers' interests? Where do they sell the coffee to? What's missing? Are they actually making money from producing coffee and selling coffee? And then from that exploratory trip, I got to go to, which is great because I got to visit all these different islands I'd never been to. So went to parts of Mindanao, I went to Negros, I went to Ifugao, I went to Mountain Province, and of course Benguet.
What was that like?
It's fascinating because I didn't really know what I was looking for. It was like this scavenger hunt, but I had these contacts. And the initial trip, which took me to this coffee community in Negros, a farmer was like, "Oh, you're here to build us a road," because the name of the company was Calzada. And like I snickered a little bit. And then I was like, I have no money to fucking build a road. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I don't actually know what I'm doing. But I also got goosebumps because I was like, that wasn't part of Calzada's narrative at that time. Like the reason why I had named Calzada, that was not to create infrastructure, which is now what Calzada is doing. But when the farmer said that, and I was like, oh, that's what's missing. They need a farm to market road. That's so important.
Right.
They need they need these things that don't exist currently because monies are spent elsewhere in terms of public funding. And how can Calzada be in the background to create that direct market linkage from the producer to then cafes and then to export to then selling in places like Seattle and San Francisco. So
no LA yet? No San Diego yet?
San Diego for sure. We have partner there, Moisture Coffee.
Oh yeah.
They're really great. So they're LA. Not currently. So LA, get your shit together. But San Francisco, Portland, New York. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, question I had was, what's it like being a female in doing business in the Philippines? Is it male dominated, like kind of your industry?
I don't think so. A lot of in different aspects of the coffee value chain. There's a lot of women leaders from the communities, co-ops to household making decisions. In terms of businesses here in Manila, I think there's quite a few female entrepreneurs. So for me, I don't see that stark difference. I think for me, going to the US and being involved in the coffee industry there, I see the wide gap in terms of women leadership. And also when I got into the coffee industry, it was here at Origin in the Philippines, but then I go to the States to go to the World Coffee events, and it's just a lot of old white dudes, and I'm like, this isn't the community I was a part of before moving to the Philippines. So I get really I get stopped in my head. I'm like, why do I have to try and sell our coffees to this guy? He doesn't understand us, right?
Yeah.
So it's been fascinating, kind of. Because I worked in social justice and worked at the Wing Luke Museum, and there's a lot of community building. But now that there's this added component of, consumption and the role of, actually to me now that I'm in the industry, the role of power and history as well, in terms of a commodity like coffee, because coffee is grown around the equatorial belt, so Brazil, Ethiopia, Colombia, the Philippines, Indonesia. A lot of it's still quote unquote developing countries, but who's actually buying the majority of these coffees, and who is making the decisions of
who's making the money?
Who's making the money? Who is making the decisions of what quality is and dictates that price, right? Which is countries like the U.S. and so it was weird. So that kind of was like, oh, okay. There's this added layer, even more so having gone this direction, which has been like a lot of the people that work in my sector that do green buying or promoting Origins are a lot of older white men, and then you don't really have also a female, but also someone that identifies as, Ethiopian American or Filipino American or Vietnamese American, but and I found a small community that understands this perspective and point of view, which has been super, super helpful. And
those are the people buying your coffee.
Yes, those are the people buying our coffee, but also doing really, really cool, interesting things in parts of Vietnam. People that are also moving back to their heritage and doing interesting work. And because I think we have I don't know if the word is authentic, but there's a different perspective and point of view, and the way you talk about the producers, because you have an affinity, but also a history versus it being some American guy trying to purchase, because it's like
the gap is a lot wider.
Yeah, it's a lot wider. So, but yeah, no, it's been really great to. Calzada has been able to, for me, I'd always felt that duality of having one foot here and one foot in the US. And Calzada's been able to connect both. And I'm really excited about other Filipino Americans that have found through Calzada a way to connect to the Philippines through food and coffee. One of our coffee buyers is Andy Town out of San Francisco. They have a couple shops. Their QC person is Filipino American. Their designer is their graphic designer is Filipino American also. So they invited me to come and talk a couple years last year. And the co-owners of the shops saw all these Filipinos and other people come to hear me talk and taste our coffee, and they're like, "There's something here," so they ended up buying coffees from us that year. And they're buying more coffees from us this year. And having champions like Corazon and Stephanie also allowed us to have like flavor notes in specialty coffee, like wine. You create these notes that remind you of something else, right? So it's like, oh, red wine tastes like berries and whatnot. And in coffee, there's a flavor wheel, and the flavor wheel is all like Western flavors, like stone fruit and all these things. And there's a quality standard about that. But how do you relate those flavor notes to like a farmer who's never had a peach, who's never had a cherry, who's never had a hazelnut? You know, it's like, when coffee buyers comes like, oh, this tastes good, this, you know. But anyways, on how it translates when you purchase specialty coffee at a coffee shop in the States, they'll have these flavor notes on retail bags. And what was exciting when Andytown launched our coffees, because Corazon was there and Stephanie, they have been attuned to different flavors that are from the Philippines, right? So on the bag, you'll see calamansi as a flavor note and latik. Which to me was like, oh, this is like our small way of this consciousness that is somewhat subversive in our small sector by adding flavor notes that wouldn't normally be a flavor note in the larger scheme of things in specialty coffee.
Right.
So that was super exciting.
So you mentioned Corazon and Stephanie. Who are they?
So they both work at Andytown. They're coffee professionals. Corazon is the QC at Andytown, and then Stephanie is their graphic designer and also barista.
Oh, QC.
Okay.
Oh.
Quality control. So.
Yeah.
I thought it was like Quezon City.
Sorry.
I was like, what?
So it sounds like, given all of the recognition that Filipino food has had or has been, granted, I guess, in the United States. And that's kind of where you started. Have you had any connections to the whole like Filipino food movement? And if so, what's that been like for you?
Yeah. We are part of, or I'm a part of, which makes Calzada a part of, the ELAO Coalition in the Pacific Northwest. I think you guys had interviewed them.
Yeah, during our Seattle episode, we interviewed a few of them.
Yeah, so before ELAO, I think they might have touched on this. Amy Bessa and Romy Dorotan did a U.S. and Canada tour through the Department of, I think it was a DFA, Department of Foreign Affairs. So different flavors from the Philippines. And our coffees are served here in Purple Yam Malate. So Amy tapped me and was like, hey, I want to do one of the legs in Seattle. There's no consulate there, so we'll probably need support from San Francisco, LA, or Vancouver to do that leg of the trip. But I know your network is there, so I kind of corralled Aaron and Melissa and Shara, and I was like, look, Amy Bessa and Romy Dorotan want to do the leg of the trip in Seattle. This is kind of cool because we always get, overlooked as a Filipino American community. This is a really great opportunity for us to work together to make this happen. So that was, I was here coordinating with them, and then I met with Aaron and Melissa and Shara, but then they kind of handled everything, and Amy and them, that was one of their legs. So that was really fun, and kind of allowed us to see who else was in the area in Seattle and surrounding, in Portland and in Vancouver, that was doing Filipino food, and so that's how my role in the U.S. and the Filipino food movement started, and I helped them in some ways here. Aaron and Amber has gone to
Aaron and Amber from
Archipelago
in Seattle.
They've gone to the coffee farms here. Melissa of Musang has also visited the coffee community in Benguet. We've also had Neil Santos and his crew from Pelago, which is a restaurant in Philadelphia. They've come and visited the farms. Oh, nice. I think their kiosk is called Lalo. And then we've had other folks, like an Australian girl come intern with us. Just other folks that have been interested in our work, but also their role in promoting Philippine coffee and in their neck of the woods. So.
Wonderful. It sounds like community organizing of sorts is very much a through line in all of the work that you've been doing, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, and I also, on the Philippine side, right, is like, of course, we export majority of our coffee, but I also knew that we wanted to keep coffees here so that locals could have what we're also exporting, right? Like a lot of countries that produce coffee actually export their best of the product, and then none of it's
totally
none of the locals,
Colombia.
right?
Yeah.
None of the locals.
We went to Colombia last year, and they said like Colombia, they don't have good coffee there because they export all the good stuff.
So I didn't want that to happen. And I was like, okay, how can we make it work? So we are also promoting our local coffees here, because in the Philippines, a lot of the things they enjoy are mostly imported stuff,
like rice.
Yeah, rice, or even like brands. They really like foreign brands like Starbucks, all these things. But how do we get them excited about local product? But now there's a good amount of movement around supporting local, and so we're part of that as well. So on this side, I wanted to make sure we were also supporting Philippine specialty coffee so that locals can taste the best that they have. And then our team, like, I know I'm leading Calzada, but there's a group of women that actually run the operations, and they're really great at it. And I know that my role is promoting it outside and tapping my networks in the U.S. and other parts of the world. But I knew the leadership had to be local. And so today, Dominique, who is our country director, she's the one that handles the team here in Manila and also works with the communities in the north. She speaks fluent Ilocano. That's something I can't, there's still, I think as a Filipino American, there's a certain role I play, but I know the community building on this side has to be super local, or else that point of view doesn't translate.
So we have to end the interview, unfortunately, but stop it. But if you are a Filipino American business and you want to get coffee through Calzada, what's the best way to do that?
So if you're in the U.S., we sell green coffee to roasters. And so the best way, we have our website, which is calzada.com. I would just write an inquiry there, and we can connect you to our partners, depending on who's the closest to where your coffee shop is or your restaurant is.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any last things?
No.
Shout outs.
Oh my gosh, so excited to be on TFAL finally.
Stupid.
Oh my God, Joe Bernardo.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Carmel.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for
carving
having
out the
me.
time. Yes, and check out Calzada. They're doing really good things in the Philippines and throughout the diaspora. So check them out. Calzada.com.
Yes.
.com. Yes.
.com.
All
Instagram, Calzada Coffee.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This Filipino American Life is produced by Michael Nailat. Our intro and outro music is by Roger Habon, aka 10.4 Raj. Resident reality checker Girly Colado, legal advisor Rianne Fajardo, and graphic design by Vincent Collyer.